My wedding day was supposed to be perfect. 18 months of planning, a gorgeous venue in Napa Valley, and finally marrying the love of my life, Daniel. But when my sister Sophia walked down the aisle in a flowing white gown, announcing she was pregnant to our entire family, I thought that was the worst betrayal I'd ever experienced. I was wrong. Because when Daniel's father stood up during the chaos that followed, what he revealed shattered everything I thought I knew about my family, my marriage, and the man I was about to say I do to forever. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The morning of September 15th started like a dream. Sunlight streamed through the vineyard's bridal suite windows as my maid of honor, Jessica, carefully arranged my grandmother's pearl necklace around my neck. 3 years of dating Daniel Patterson, 6 months engaged, and here we were at Silverbrook Winery, about to become husband and wife in front of 180 guests. "Charlotte, you look absolutely radiant," my mother, Linda, whispered as she adjusted my cathedral-length veil. The Vera Wang dress fit like it was painted on, ivory silk that cascaded into a train worthy of a princess. Everything was exactly as I dreamed since I was 7 years old, playing at weddings with my Barbie dolls. The bridal party gathered for final touch-ups. My childhood best friend Rachel smoothed her dusty rose bridesmaid dress, while my cousin Emma checked her lipstick one last time. But someone was missing. "Where's Sophia?" I asked, scanning the room. "My sister was supposed to be here an hour ago for final preparations." "She texted saying she'd meet us at the ceremony site," Jessica replied, not meeting my eyes. Something flickered across her expression that I couldn't quite read. I should have pressed for details, but honestly, Sophia being dramatically late wasn't unusual. At 26, she was 2 years younger than me, but acted like she was still in college half the time. Always the center of attention, always making everything about her. I'd learned to expect it. The photographer, Marcus, guided us through the final shots in the bridal suite. Golden hour lighting painted everything in warm honey tones as we posed with champagne flutes and bouquets of white roses and eucalyptus. My phone buzzed with texts from Daniel. "Can't wait to see you walking down that aisle, Mrs. Patterson-to-be." My heart swelled. Daniel worked as a software architect for a major tech company in San Francisco, and we'd met at a mutual friend's housewarming party in Palo Alto. He was kind, stable, funny in a quiet way that made me feel like the only person in the room when he smiled. After a string of disappointing relationships throughout my 20s, Daniel felt like coming home. "Time to head to the ceremony," Jessica announced, checking her phone. The bridal party gathered our flowers and began the short walk from the main building to the vineyard's outdoor chapel area. Silverbrook Winery was everything I'd imagined for my wedding venue. Rolling hills covered in grapevines stretched as far as the eye could see, with the ceremony space nestled between ancient oak trees. White chairs arranged in neat rows faced an arbor draped in flowing fabric and cascading flowers. String lights would illuminate everything once the sun set, creating the romantic atmosphere I'd been planning for over a year. As we approached the staging area behind the ceremony space, I could hear the gentle murmur of arriving guests. Daniel's groomsmen, led by his brother Michael, were already in position. My father, Robert, waited near the entrance to the aisle, looking distinguished in his charcoal gray tuxedo. "There's my beautiful daughter," he said, his eyes misting slightly. Dad owned a successful accounting firm in Sacramento and had always been my biggest supporter. "Your mother and I are so proud of you, Charlotte. Daniel's a good man." The processional music began. Canon in D flowed through the warm September air as Jessica began her walk down the aisle, followed by Rachel and Emma. Each step brought me closer to the moment I'd been dreaming about since Daniel proposed on the beach in Carmel last March. But as the bridal march started and I took my father's arm, something felt off. A ripple of whispers moved through the seated guests, heads turning toward the back of the ceremony space rather than toward me. That's when I saw her. Sophia stood at the edge of the seating area wearing a floor-length white. Not off-white, not cream, not blush. Pure bridal white.
The flowing chiffon caught the late afternoon breeze as she walked, not to her seat in the front row where the family was positioned, but straight down the center aisle. Time seemed to slow as confused murmurs grew louder. My father's arm tensed under mine. "What is she doing?" he whispered. The officiant, Pastor Williams, looked bewildered as Sophia approached the altar area where Daniel stood with his groomsmen. Daniel's face had gone pale, his eyes darting between me and my sister with obvious confusion. Sophia reached the front of the ceremony space and turned to face our guests. The woman who was supposed to be my sister, my maid of honor, my supporter on the most important day of my life, stood there in white and raised her hands for attention. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent vineyard. My bouquet trembled in my hands. Jessica had stopped halfway down the aisle and was staring at Sophia with her mouth slightly open. In the front row, I could see my mother's horrified expression and Daniel's parents looking equally stunned. "I know this isn't traditional timing," Sophia continued, a strange smile playing on her lips, "but I couldn't let this day pass without announcing that I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant? My sister was pregnant and chose to announce it at my wedding, wearing white, stealing focus from what was supposed to be my moment? Gasps and shocked whispers erupted from the seated guests. Some people started clapping uncertainly, unsure how to respond to such an unprecedented situation. Others sat in stunned silence. But the chaos was just beginning. From the third row, Daniel's father, William Patterson, slowly stood up. He was a tall man with silver hair and unusually commanding presence, having built a successful construction company from the ground up. Today, however, his face was ashen. "Sophia," he said, his voice cutting through the confused murmur of the crowd. The way he said her name made something cold settle in my stomach. Not surprised, not confused like everyone else, like he knew something the rest of us didn't. Sophia's confident smile faltered for just a moment before she lifted her chin defiantly. "Actually, William, I think everyone should hear this." My legs felt weak. The perfect September day, the carefully planned ceremony, the months of preparation, everything was dissolving into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. But somehow, watching the expression on my future father-in-law's face as he stared at my sister, I knew the worst was yet to come. Daniel took a step toward me, his hand outstretched. "Charlotte, I don't understand what's happening."
Neither did I, but as William Patterson walked toward the front of the ceremony with determination in his step, and Sophia stood there in her white dress with her hand protectively placed over her stomach, I realized that my wedding day was about to become something none of us would ever forget. The last thing I remember thinking before everything exploded was how quiet the vineyard had become. Even the birds seemed to be holding their breath, waiting for whatever revelation was about to shatter my world completely. William Patterson reached the front of the ceremony space, his jaw set in a way that made the veins in his neck visible. At 62, he commanded respect in every room he entered, but right now he looked like a man walking toward his own execution. "Sophia, step away from the altar," he said quietly, but his voice carried across the silent vineyard. "No, William, I think it's time everyone knew the truth." Sophia's voice had taken on an edge I'd never heard before. She turned to face the crowd of wedding guests, many of whom were now standing and craning their necks to see what was happening. My mother had gone completely white and was gripping my aunt's arm. Daniel's mother, Patricia, looked like she might faint. But it was the expression on Daniel's face that made my heart plummet. No confusion anymore. Recognition. Like pieces of a puzzle he'd been trying to ignore were finally clicking into place. "Sophia, please," William tried again, taking another step forward. "This isn't the time or place." "When would be the right time, William?" Sophia's laugh was bitter. "At your family's Christmas dinner? During your grandson's birthday party? Or maybe at your 40th wedding anniversary next month?" Patricia Patterson made a small, wounded sound from the front row.
The color had drained from her face so completely that Jessica's mother reached over to steady her. "What is she talking about?" Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper, but in the absolute silence of the vineyard, everyone heard him. William closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, he looked older than his years. "Son, we should discuss this privately." "No." Daniel's voice got stronger. "Whatever this is, whatever she's implying, I want to know now, in front of everyone." Sophia placed both hands on her stomach, the white fabric of her dress catching the late afternoon light. "Since William won't say it, I will. I'm 4 months pregnant, and the father is standing right there." She pointed directly at William Patterson.
A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The sound that went up from the crowd was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Gasps, shouts, someone's chair falling over. My father's grip on my arm tightened so much it hurt. Patricia Patterson made a sound like she'd been physically struck. "You're lying." Daniel's voice was hollow. "You're lying because you want attention, because you can't stand that Charlotte is getting married." But William Patterson's face told a different story. The man who had welcomed me into his family, who had given the toast at our engagement party, who had walked me through the wedding planning process with fatherly advice, looked broken. "Daniel," his voice cracked, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The apology confirmed everything. My bouquet fell from nerveless fingers, white roses scattering across the grass. The man I was about to marry was staring at his father with a mixture of horror and disgust that I'd never seen on his face before. "How long?" Daniel demanded. William looked at the ground. "It started last Christmas." Last Christmas? I remembered that party. Daniel and I had driven down from San Francisco to his parents' house in Los Gatos. Sophia had been there, charming and vivacious as always, helping Patricia in the kitchen, playing with the neighbors' kids. I remembered thinking how much William seemed to enjoy her company, how they'd spent a long time talking about her job at the marketing firm. "Last Christmas," Daniel repeated slowly. 9 months ago. "It wasn't supposed to happen," William said, finally looking up at his son. "We were both drunk. Your mother had gone to bed early with a headache. Sophia was upset about her breakup with Tyler. It was one night, Daniel. One terrible mistake." "One night?" Sophia's voice cut across his words like a blade. "Is that what you call the hotel in Monterey in February? What about the weekend in Lake Tahoe in March? The apartment you've been paying for in San Jose since April?" Each revelation was like a physical blow. Patricia Patterson was openly crying now, her shoulders shaking as Daniel's brother Michael tried to comfort her. My own mother looked like she might be sick. "An apartment?" Daniel's voice was getting louder. "You've been keeping her in an apartment?" William's silence was answered enough. I found my voice for the first time since this nightmare began. "Sophia, how could you? How could you do this to our family?" She turned to look at me, and for a moment, I saw something that looked almost like regret cross her face, but it was quickly replaced by defiance. "I didn't plan for this to happen, Charlotte, but I'm not going to hide anymore. I'm not going to sneak around and pretend this baby doesn't exist just to protect everyone's feelings." "This baby?" Patricia Patterson's voice was barely audible. "William, please tell me you're not actually the father." The silence stretched until it became unbearable. William looked at his wife of 39 years, the woman who had built a life with him, raised 2 sons with him, supported his business through every struggle and success. "Patricia, don't." She stood up abruptly, her purse clutched against her chest. "Don't you dare try to explain this away." She walked out. Not down the aisle, but straight across the vineyard, her heels clicking against the stone pathway until she disappeared behind the main building. Michael Patterson stood up next. "Dad, what have you done?" But William didn't answer. He was staring at Daniel, waiting for his son's reaction. Daniel had gone completely still, not frozen with shock like the rest of us, but still in the way that predators get before they strike. When he finally spoke, his voice was deadly calm. "Get out." "Daniel, please, we can work through this." "Get out."
The roar echoed across the vineyard. "Get out of my wedding! Get out of my sight! Get away from my wife!" "I'm not your wife yet," I whispered, but nobody heard me except my father, whose arm tightened around me protectively. Sophia looked between William and Daniel, and for the first time since she'd walked down that aisle, uncertainty flickered across her face. "Daniel, I know this is hard."
Hard? Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're carrying my father's child, and you chose to announce it at my wedding? Hard doesn't begin to cover what this is. William took a step toward his son. We'll leave, but Daniel, I need you to know that I love you. This doesn't change that. This changes everything. Daniel's voice broke slightly. Everything. Father and son stared at each other across the flower-scattered grass, 30 years of relationship hanging in the balance. Then William turned and walked away, his shoulders bent like an old man's. Sophia hesitated for a moment longer, her white dress a mockery of everything this day was supposed to represent. "Charlotte, I'm sorry it happened this way." "Are you?" I found my voice again, stronger this time. "Are you really sorry, Sophia, or are you just sorry you got caught?" She didn't answer. She followed William across the vineyard, leaving behind a crowd of stunned wedding guests and the ruins of what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Pastor Williams cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should take a brief recess to allow everyone to collect themselves. But I was already walking away, still in my wedding dress, still wearing my grandmother's pearls, my father hurrying to keep up with me as I headed back toward the bridal suite. Behind us, 180 wedding guests sat in shocked silence, unsure whether to stay or leave, while Daniel stood alone at the altar, staring at the space where his father had been. The bridal suite felt like a tomb. I sat on the velvet ottoman in my wedding dress, staring at my reflection in the full-length mirror. The woman looking back at me was still wearing perfect makeup, still had her hair arranged in an intricate updo with tiny white flowers woven through it, still looked like a bride. But everything had changed in the span of 20 minutes. My father paced near the windows, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in hushed tones to my uncle, trying to figure out what to do with 180 confused wedding guests. My mother sat beside me, her hand resting on my shoulder, but she hadn't spoken since we'd retreated from the ceremony site. Jessica appeared in the doorway, her dusty rose dress wrinkled from where she'd been gripping the fabric. "Charlotte, honey, what do you want me to tell people? Half the guests are asking if they should leave. The other half are just standing around taking pictures with their phones." Pictures. Of course people were taking pictures. My humiliation was probably already spreading across social media. I could imagine the captions. "Wedding disaster. Sister announces pregnancy in white dress. The groom's father is the baby daddy?" "Tell them the ceremony is postponed indefinitely," I managed to say, "and ask Marcus to stop taking photographs." "Already done," Rachel said, joining Jessica in the doorway. The photographer packed up his equipment the minute William walked away, very professional about the whole thing. At least someone was being professional. My own sister had just blown up my wedding in the most spectacular way possible, and all I could think about was damage control. A soft knock on the door interrupted my spiraling thoughts. "Charlotte?" Daniel's voice was barely recognizable. "Can I come in?" My father stopped pacing. My mother tensed beside me. Jessica and Rachel exchanged glances. "Yes," I whispered. Daniel stepped into the bridal suite, and I barely recognized him. His tuxedo jacket was gone, his white shirt was untucked, and his tie hung loose around his neck. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. They were red-rimmed and hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made him Daniel and left behind an empty shell. "I need to talk to Charlotte alone," he said quietly. My parents and bridesmaids filed out without argument, closing the door behind them. Daniel and I were left facing each other across the room that an hour ago had been filled with laughter and champagne toasts. "I didn't know," he said immediately. "Charlotte, I swear to you, I had no idea about any of this." I studied his face, looking for any sign of deception, but all I saw was devastation and truth. Daniel wasn't capable of the kind of acting this would require. "I believe you," I said.
and watched some of the tension leave his shoulders. He moved closer, stopping just out of reach. What do we do now? It was such a simple question with such an impossible answer. What did we do? Our wedding was ruined, our families were shattered, and everything we'd built together had been contaminated by this betrayal. I don't know, I admitted.
Daniel sat down heavily in one of the chairs near the window. My father called me this morning to wish me luck. He said he was proud of me, that he couldn't wait to welcome you officially into the family. His laugh was bitter, all while he's been sleeping with your sister for 9 months. The words hung in the air between us. I wanted to comfort him, to cross the room and hold him, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the knowledge that Sophia's baby would always be part of our lives if we moved forward. Maybe it was the way this betrayal had revealed fractures in both our families that I'd never noticed before. When did you start suspecting? I asked. Daniel ran his hands through his hair, destroying the careful styling. I didn't, not really, but there were little things. The way my dad always asked about Sophia when we'd talk on the phone, how he seemed to know details about her life that I'd never mentioned. Last month, when we all had dinner in the city, he paid for her parking meter while she was in the bathroom. I thought he was just being nice. The apartment, I said. Did you know about any apartment? Nothing. I mean, I knew Sophia had moved out of her place with Tyler, but I assumed she was staying with friends or maybe with your parents temporarily. He looked up at me. San Jose isn't that far from Los Gatos. He could have been seeing her regularly without anyone knowing. The logistics of their affair were almost as devastating as the affair itself. The planning, the deception, the months of lying to everyone who loved them. How many family dinners had they sat through, pretending to be nothing more than future in-laws? How many times had William offered me fatherly advice about marriage while he was betraying his own wife? Charlotte, Daniel said softly, I know this is insane timing, but I need to ask you something. I looked at him. This man I'd been planning to spend my life with just an hour ago. Do you think there's any way we can get past this? The question I'd been dreading. Because the honest answer was that I didn't know. How do you marry someone when your sister is carrying his father's child? How do you build a life together when family gatherings would forever include the living reminder of this betrayal? I love you, I said, and his face brightened slightly. But Daniel, think about what this means. Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas mornings, birthdays, graduations. That baby will be at all of them, your half-sibling and my nephew or niece. His face fell as reality sank in. We could move away, start over somewhere else. And never see our families again? Never let our children know their grandparents? My father doesn't deserve to know our children, Daniel said with sudden vehemence. What about your mother? What about Michael? They're innocent in all of this. Daniel slumped forward, his head in his hands. This is impossible. Yes, I agreed. It is. A longer knock interrupted us. Charlotte, my father's voice, there's someone here who wants to speak with you. Not Sophia, I said immediately. No, sweetheart, it's Patricia Patterson. Daniel's head shot up. My mother? I smoothed my dress and opened the door. Patricia stood in the hallway, still in her mother of the groom dress, but her makeup was ruined from crying, and her usually perfect hair was disheveled. Patricia, I said gently, come in. She entered the bridal suite and immediately went to Daniel, wrapping him in a fierce hug. My boy, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Mom, Daniel's voice was muffled against her shoulder. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. Neither did I. Patricia pulled back to look at her son. 39 years of marriage, and I never saw this coming. Not once. She turned to me then, her eyes red but determined. Charlotte, I want you to know that whatever you decide about Daniel, about your future together, you have my complete support. What William did, what your sister did, it has nothing to do with the love you two share. But it affects everything, I said quietly. Yes, it does, Patricia agreed, and I won't pretend otherwise. If you decide you can't move forward, I'll understand. If you decide to postpone everything until this settles, I'll support that too.
but I want you to know that you're not losing me as a mother-in-law because of their choices." Her words were kind, but they made the situation even more complicated. Because now it wasn't just about Daniel and me. It was about Patricia, who'd just lost her husband and marriage. It was about Michael, who'd lost his respect for his father. It was about my parents, who were probably questioning everything they thought they knew about Sophia. "Have you heard from William?" Daniel asked his mother.
Patricia's face hardened. "He's at his brother's house. He tried calling, but I'm not ready to hear his excuses." "What are you going to do?" "I honestly don't know. 39 years doesn't just disappear overnight, but I can't look at him right now without—" She trailed off, glancing at me apologetically. "It's okay," I said. "You can say it. Without seeing Sophia." Patricia nodded. "I keep thinking about all the times she was at our house, all the conversations they had. Were they planning this? Was every family gathering just an opportunity for them to—" She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. We were all imagining the same scenarios, all wondering how long this had been going on, and how blind we'd been to miss it. The knock on the bridal suite door came sharper this time, followed immediately by my mother's voice. "Charlotte, we have a problem." I opened the door to find my mother standing with Marcus, our wedding photographer, who looked deeply uncomfortable. Behind them, I could see Jessica wringing her hands. "What now?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Marcus stepped forward, his camera bag slung over his shoulder. "Charlotte, I'm really sorry about this, but I thought you should know. Some of your guests have been posting videos on social media. The whole thing with your sister and Mr. Patterson has gone viral." My stomach dropped. Viral? "Someone live-streamed the entire confrontation on Instagram," Jessica explained. "It's been shared thousands of times already. There are TikToks, Twitter threads, and Facebook posts. Everyone's calling it the wedding disaster of the year." Daniel cursed under his breath. Patricia sank into a chair, looking defeated. "Can we get them taken down?" I asked desperately. Marcus shook his head. "Once something spreads like this, it's almost impossible to contain. I'm sorry, Charlotte. I stopped filming the moment things went south, but other people had their phones out. My wedding disaster was now entertainment for strangers across the internet. People who didn't know me, didn't know our families, were probably laughing at the drama that had destroyed my life in 20 minutes. "There's more," my mother said gently. "Channel 7 News called. They want to do a story about it. Apparently, someone recognized William from his construction company's commercials." "The news?" Daniel's voice cracked. "This is going to be on the news?" Of course it was. William Patterson Construction had been advertising on local television for years. "When you need it built right, call Patterson." The jingle had been stuck in my head since I was a teenager. Now his business would be associated with the messiest family scandal Northern California had seen in years. "We need to leave," I said suddenly. "All of us. We need to get out of here before reporters show up." "Where are we supposed to go?" Daniel asked. "My apartment, your apartment, they'll find us." "My cabin," Patricia said quietly. "The one at Lake Almanor. William doesn't have the key anymore." She pulled a set of keys from her purse with shaking hands. "I changed the locks last month, after I found some things." Everyone looked at her. This was the first mention of finding anything suspicious. "What kind of things?" Daniel asked carefully. Patricia's face crumpled slightly. "Hotel receipts, credit card statements for restaurants I'd never been to. I thought maybe he was planning a surprise for our anniversary." She laughed bitterly. I was such a fool. So she had suspected something. The betrayal ran even deeper than we'd realized. Patricia had been living with doubt and suspicion while trying to plan our wedding, trying to maintain normalcy for our sake. "The cabin is perfect," my mother said decisively. "Charlotte can get out of that dress. We can figure out what to do next without cameras and reporters hounding us." I looked down at my wedding dress, the beautiful Vera Wang gown that now felt like a costume from a play that had ended badly. The idea of getting out of it, of washing off this makeup and removing these flowers from my hair, felt like the first sensible suggestion anyone had made all day. "What about our guests?" I asked. "We can't just abandon everyone."
Your father and I will handle that. We'll make sure people get to their cars safely, deal with the vendors, and handle the cleanup. You and Daniel need to focus on yourselves right now. Rachel stepped forward. I'll come with you to the cabin. Jessica, too, if you want. You shouldn't be alone.
I looked at Daniel, who nodded gratefully. Michael's driving Mom up there. We can all regroup and figure out our next steps. Our next steps? As if there was a roadmap for how to handle your sister sleeping with your fiancé's father and announcing her pregnancy at your wedding while it goes viral on social media? 20 minutes later, I was in the back of Jessica's car, finally out of my wedding dress and into jeans and a sweater Rachel had grabbed from my overnight bag. My hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, my face scrubbed clean of makeup. I felt more like myself than I had all day, but also completely lost. Daniel was driving ahead of us with Michael, while Patricia rode with my mother. Our strange caravan wound through the California hills, leaving behind the vineyard, the reporters who had started gathering in the parking lot, and the wreckage of what was supposed to be the best day of my life. "Your phone's been buzzing constantly," Jessica said, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. I pulled my phone from my purse and immediately regretted it. Hundreds of notifications. Text messages, missed calls, social media tags, news app alerts. I recognized some of the numbers: college friends, coworkers, distant relatives who'd seen the videos online. One message stood out from my boss at the marketing agency where I worked. "Charlotte, saw the news. Take all the time you need. Don't worry about the Henderson presentation on Monday." The Henderson presentation? I'd completely forgotten about work, about my normal life that would be waiting for me whenever this nightmare ended. How was I supposed to walk into the office on Monday and pretend everything was fine when everyone had probably seen videos of my sister destroying my wedding? "Look at this one," Jessica said, holding up her own phone. Someone made a meme out of the whole thing. They put dramatic music over the video of Sophia walking down the aisle. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't help myself. There was my sister, in her white dress, looking radiant and confident as she strode toward my altar. The caption read, "Plot twist nobody saw coming." The video had 2 million views. "Turn it off," I said, "please." The mountain roads grew steeper as we climbed toward Lake Almanor. The sun was setting behind us, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that would have been perfect for wedding photos. Instead, I was fleeing to a cabin with my almost mother-in-law and my broken almost husband, trying to escape the viral video of my family's destruction. My phone rang, and Sophia's name appeared on the screen. "Don't answer it," Jessica said immediately. "I have to, eventually." But not today. I declined the call and watched as it immediately rang again. Same name. I declined again. The third time it rang, I turned the phone off completely. Lake Almanor appeared through the trees, its surface reflecting the last light of day like a mirror. Patricia's cabin sat on a bluff overlooking the water, a modest A-frame with a wraparound deck and large windows. It looked peaceful, isolated, exactly what we needed. As we pulled into the gravel driveway, I could see Daniel and Michael already unloading Dags from their car. Patricia stood on the deck, looking out over the lake, her shoulders rigid with the weight of everything that had happened. "You know what the worst part is?" I said to Jessica as we got out of the car. "What's that?" "I keep thinking about the cake. We had this beautiful 3-tier cake with sugar flowers that matched my bouquet exactly. The caterers probably served it to the guests who stayed, or maybe they just threw it away." I felt tears threatening for the first time since this whole disaster began. All that planning, all those details, and it's just gone. Jessica put her arm around me. "We'll get through this, Charlotte. All of us will." But as I stood there looking at the lake, with my wedding dress abandoned at a vineyard an hour away, and my sister's betrayal trending on social media, I honestly wasn't sure how we'd ever get through anything again. The cabin's interior felt like stepping back in time. Rustic pine walls, stone fireplace, family photos spanning decades of Patterson family vacations. Daniel's graduation pictures sat next to Michael's wedding photos, a lifetime of memories that now felt tainted by William's betrayal. Patricia moved through the space mechanically,
turning on lights and adjusting the thermostat. "There's food in the freezer, coffee in the pantry," she said to no one in particular. "I stocked up last month, thinking William and I would spend our anniversary weekend here." The mention of their anniversary hung heavy in the air. 40 years of marriage was supposed to be celebrated next month. Instead, Patricia was hiding from reporters at the cabin she'd once shared with her cheating husband.
Michael emerged from one of the bedrooms, his tie finally removed, sleeves rolled up. "Mom, you should sit down. You've been taking care of everyone else all day." "I need to stay busy," Patricia replied, but she accepted the cup of coffee he handed her. "If I stop moving, I'll have to think about what happens next." Daniel was standing by the large windows overlooking the lake, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. "We should probably talk about logistics," Jessica said carefully. "The wedding vendors, the honeymoon reservations, the marriage license," Daniel said without turning around. "It expires in 90 days. 90 days. The number sat between us like a deadline. In 90 days, we'd either have to use the license or let it expire. Get married despite everything that had happened, or officially acknowledge that Sophia's announcement had ended our relationship along with our wedding." My phone, which I'd turned back on reluctantly, buzzed with another call. This time it was my father. "Dad? Sweetheart, I wanted to update you on the situation here. Most of the guests have left, but we've had to call hotel security twice. People are trying to sneak onto the vineyard property to take pictures." "Pictures of what?" "The ceremony site mostly. Someone online is calling it ground zero of the wedding disaster. The vineyard manager is furious. Apparently, this kind of publicity isn't what they had in mind when they booked the venue." I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache building. Our wedding scandal was now affecting innocent businesses, creating problems for people who had nothing to do with our family drama. "What about the vendors?" "Your mother's handling most of that. The caterers are demanding full payment despite the ceremony not happening. The florist is being more reasonable. The band, well, they played for about an hour after everything fell apart. Apparently, some guests decided to treat it like a very expensive cocktail party. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. While my life was falling apart, complete strangers were having drinks and dancing at my ruined wedding reception." "Dad, have you heard from Sophia?" The pause told me everything I needed to know. "She's at the house," he admitted. "She came by about an hour ago, wanting to explain herself. Your mother wouldn't let her in." "Good." "Charlotte, she seemed different. Upset, but not the way I expected. Almost like she regretted the whole thing." "She regrets getting caught," I said firmly. "She doesn't regret sleeping with William, or getting pregnant, or announcing it at my wedding. She regrets that it didn't go the way she planned." Daniel turned from the window at the sound of my voice. The expression on his face was unreadable. "Your mother thinks we should consider family counseling," my father continued. "All of us together to work through this." Family counseling? The idea was so absurd I almost laughed. "Dad, she's pregnant with my fiancé's father's baby. What kind of counseling is supposed to fix that?" "I don't know, sweetheart. I'm just trying to figure out how we move forward from here." After I hung up, the cabin fell silent again, except for the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore. Patricia was staring into her coffee cup like it might contain answers. Michael was checking his own phone, probably fielding calls from friends who'd seen the videos. Daniel remained by the window, lost in thought. "I need to ask you something," I said to Daniel, "and I need you to be completely honest with me." He turned to face me, wariness flickering across his features. "Did you ever suspect anything between Sophia and your father, even for a moment?" Daniel was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Once, maybe. It was stupid, and I dismissed it immediately." "When?" "Your birthday dinner in July. We were at that Italian place in Union Square, and Sophia was telling some story about her job. She made this joke about older men being more mature than guys her age, and she looked right at my dad when she said it. They both laughed, but there was something—" He shook his head. "It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but something felt off." July, 3 months ago. While I was blowing out candles on my birthday cake, my sister and future father-in-law were sharing some private jokes about their affair? Why didn't you say anything?"
Because it was insane. Because my dad had been married to my mom for 36 years. Because Sophia was your sister and she was dating Tyler, and the whole idea was impossible. His voice got stronger. Because I trusted them. Patricia looked up from her coffee. We all trusted them. That's what makes this so devastating. It wasn't just one betrayal, it was months of lies. Every family gathering, every conversation where they pretended to be nothing more than future in-laws. Michael's phone rang, and he stepped outside onto the deck to take the call. Through the window, we could see him pacing, his free hand running through his hair in frustration. That's probably his wife, Patricia said. Sarah's been trying to manage the kids while this whole circus plays out. They're supposed to explain to a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old why Grandpa William isn't coming to dinner anymore. More casualties of the affair. Daniel's nephew and niece, who adored their grandfather, would now have their relationship with him forever changed. Family holidays would be minefields of tension and divided loyalties.
I keep thinking about Christmas, Daniel said quietly. Every year, my whole family gathers at my parents' house. My mom makes her famous prime rib, the kids open presents, we play board games until midnight. What happens now? I don't know, Patricia admitted. I can't imagine sitting across a Christmas dinner table from William, pretending everything's fine for the sake of tradition. But what about the grandkids? I asked. What about Michael's family, your traditions? Everything's broken now, Patricia said simply. We'll have to build new traditions. Michael came back inside, his expression grim. That was Sarah. She's been getting calls from reporters all afternoon. Someone tracked down our address, probably through social media. They're camped outside our house. Jesus, Daniel muttered. This just keeps getting worse. Sarah took the kids to her mother's place in Sacramento, Michael continued. But Charlotte, they're looking for you too. And Daniel. This story has legs, and everyone wants an exclusive interview with the betrayed bride and the devastated groom. I felt sick. The idea of reporters following me, trying to get me to talk about the worst day of my life for their entertainment, made me want to hide in this cabin forever. There's something else, Michael said reluctantly. Dad called Sarah. He wants to meet with all of us. He says he has more to explain. More? Daniel's voice was sharp. What could he possibly have to explain that would make any of this better? I don't know, but Sarah said he sounded desperate, like there was something else we didn't know. The room went silent as we all processed this. What could possibly be worse than what we already knew? What other secrets had William been keeping that were significant enough to risk reaching out when he had to know how unwelcome his contact would be? I don't want to hear it, Patricia said firmly. Whatever he has to say, it won't change what he did. But I found myself curious, despite everything. What could William Patterson possibly reveal that would make this situation even more complicated than it already was? The debate about whether to meet with William raged for 2 hours. Patricia was adamant she wouldn't see him. Daniel swung between fury and morbid curiosity. Michael argued for hearing him out, if only to get closure. I sat curled up on the cabin's leather couch, exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the day. What if he's dying? Michael asked for the 3rd time. What if there's some medical reason he acted so out of character? Being a cheating bastard isn't a medical condition, and it doesn't explain why he kept an apartment for Sophia or why he lied to all of us for months. But what if? Stop. Patricia's voice cut through the argument. Just stop. I lived with that man for 39 years. I know when he's manipulating people, and this is exactly what he does. He creates mystery and urgency to get people to engage with him when they'd rather walk away. Jessica, who had been quietly making dinner in the cabin's small kitchen, appeared with a tray of sandwiches. Maybe you should eat something before making any big decisions. Nobody moved toward the food. The stress of the day had killed everyone's appetite. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Sophia won't stop calling. She says she needs to talk to you urgently, something about the baby. What now? Daniel asked, seeing my expression. Sophia wants to talk about the baby. There's nothing to talk about, Patricia said firmly. She made her choice when she decided to sleep with my husband.
She made another choice when she announced her pregnancy at your wedding. She doesn't get to dictate the terms of how we deal with this. But something nagged at me. My sister was many things: dramatic, attention-seeking, impulsive, but she wasn't usually cruel. The way she'd handled the wedding announcement was vindictive in a way that didn't match the Sophia I'd grown up with. "I'm going to call her," I said suddenly. "Charlotte, no," Daniel protested. "Not to forgive her or make up with her, but I need to understand why she did it that way. Why couldn't she have just told me privately or waited until after the ceremony? Why did she have to blow up my wedding in front of 180 people?" I stepped onto the deck before anyone could stop me. The mountain air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. I dialed Sophia's number, and she answered before the first ring finished. "Charlotte, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I know. What do you want, Sophia?" "I need to explain." "No, you need to answer my question. Why did you do it that way? Why at my wedding, in front of everyone?" The silence stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. "Because I was scared," she finally whispered. "Because I knew if I told you privately, you'd talk me out of it." "Talk you out of what?" "Out of telling the truth about William." "What truth? We know you're having an affair. We know you're pregnant. What other truth is there?" Another long pause. When Sophia spoke again, her voice was shaky. "Charlotte, William isn't just the father of my baby. He's been controlling everything about this pregnancy. Where I live, what doctor I see, who I'm allowed to talk to. The apartment isn't a love nest, it's a prison."
My blood went cold. What are you talking about? He doesn't want anyone to know about the baby until after it's born. He made me sign papers saying I wouldn't seek child support or put his name on the birth certificate. He's been paying my rent and giving me money, but only if I stay hidden and keep quiet. I gripped the deck railing, trying to process what she was saying. "So you announced it at my wedding because it was the one place I knew he couldn't stop me, the one place where his whole family and our whole family would be together, where he couldn't control the narrative or threaten to cut off my money if I talked." The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made me sick to my stomach. "Sophia, are you saying William was coercing you?" "I'm saying I made a terrible mistake with a married man, and then he spent 4 months making sure I understood that mistake would stay hidden no matter what." Her voice cracked. "I wore white to your wedding because I wanted to make sure everyone understood that this wasn't some secret affair. I wanted witnesses." I closed my eyes, feeling the foundation of my anger shift beneath me. I was still furious with Sophia for destroying my wedding, but if what she was saying was true, then William's behavior was far worse than any of us had realized. "Where are you now?" "At Mom and Dad's. William called me 6 times after the wedding, threatening to stop paying my medical bills if I talked to any reporters or said anything else about the baby." "He threatened you?" "Charlotte, I think he's dangerous. Not physically, but he has money and lawyers, and he's been very clear about what happens if I don't do exactly what he says." I walked back inside the cabin, my mind reeling. Daniel, Patricia, and Michael all looked up expectantly. "We need to meet with William," I announced. "Absolutely not," Patricia said immediately. "Patricia, I think he's been coercing Sophia, threatening her, controlling her pregnancy, trying to hide the whole thing." Daniel stood up abruptly. "What do you mean, controlling her pregnancy?" I explained what Sophia had told me, watching the color drain from Patricia's face as I spoke. "Legal papers about child support?" she whispered. "He made her sign legal papers?" "And threats about money and medical bills." Michael pulled out his phone. "I'm calling him right now." "No," I said quickly. "If Sophia's right about him being controlling and potentially dangerous, we need to be smarter about this. We need to meet with him on our terms, in a place where we have the advantage." "The cabin," Patricia said suddenly. "He doesn't know where the spare key is anymore.
He thinks I changed all the locks after finding those hotel receipts, but I only changed the house locks. If we can get him up here, we can control the conversation, Daniel finished. Record it, I asked. Record it, I asked. If he's been coercing and threatening Sophia, we need proof for her protection and for Mom's divorce proceedings. Patricia's face hardened with resolution. Make the call. Tell him we'll meet him here tomorrow morning, all of us together. Michael hesitated. Are you sure about this, Mom? You said you couldn't stand to see him. That was before I knew he might have been threatening a pregnant woman, before I realized this might not be a simple affair. Patricia's voice was steel. If William has been abusing his position of power over Sophia, then this is about more than just cheating on me. I thought about my sister, alone and scared, feeling like she had to blow up my wedding just to get help. I thought about William, the man who had given me fatherly advice about marriage while secretly controlling and manipulating my sister's pregnancy. Call him, I said to Michael. Tell him we want answers, all of them. As Michael dialed his father's number, I realized that tomorrow's confrontation might finally reveal the full scope of William Patterson's betrayal. And I had a sinking feeling that what we already knew was just the beginning. The lake outside looked peaceful in the moonlight, its surface reflecting the stars like scattered diamonds. But inside the cabin, we were preparing for a battle that would determine the future of both our families.
William Patterson had destroyed my wedding and shattered our trust. Tomorrow, we would find out just how deep his deception really went. William arrived at exactly 9 a.m., just as the morning mist was lifting off Lake Almanor. I watched from the cabin's kitchen window as his black BMW pulled into the gravel driveway, the same car that had been in our family photos for years, at birthday parties and graduations and Sunday dinners. He sat in the driver's seat for several minutes before getting out, and when he finally did, he looked like he'd aged a decade overnight. His silver hair was disheveled, his usually impeccable clothes wrinkled, and he moved with the hesitant gait of a man walking toward his own execution. Patricia stood at the living room window, her phone already recording. Daniel and Michael flanked her like bodyguards, while Jessica remained in the kitchen with me, ready to call 911 if things went sideways. The knock on the door was soft, almost apologetic. "Come in," Patricia called, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. William entered the cabin he'd helped build 20 years ago, the place where he'd taught his sons to fish and celebrated countless family vacations. Now he stood in the doorway like a stranger, his eyes darting between his wife and children with obvious fear. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he began. "Cut the pleasantries," Daniel interrupted. "You said you had more to explain. Start talking." William pulled a manila envelope from his jacket pocket, his hands shaking slightly. "Before I say anything else, you need to know that I never meant for any of this to happen, especially not at your wedding, Charlotte." "But it did happen," I said, stepping into the living room. "And according to Sophia, there's a lot more to this story than just an affair." William's face crumpled. "She told you about the arrangements?" "The arrangements?" Patricia's voice was ice. "Is that what you call threatening a pregnant woman?" "I wasn't threatening her. I was trying to protect everyone involved." William set the envelope on the coffee table. "Patricia, the kids, my business, your family's reputation. I thought if I could manage the situation quietly—" "Manage?" Michael stepped forward. "Dad, you got Charlotte's sister pregnant and then tried to cover it up. There's no managing that." William opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of papers. "The legal documents Sophia signed aren't what she thinks they are." "What do you mean?" I asked, though dread was already pooling in my stomach. "I never asked her to sign away child support rights. I never tried to keep my name off the birth certificate." He spread the papers on the table. "These are adoption papers, Charlotte. I was arranging for you and Daniel to adopt the baby." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Jessica gasped from the kitchen doorway. Patricia went completely white. Daniel staggered backward as if he'd been punched. "Adoption papers?" I whispered. I knew the affair would destroy our families. I knew Patricia would never forgive me, that Daniel would hate me forever. But I also knew that the baby would need parents who could love it without resentment. William's voice broke. I thought if you and Daniel raised the child, if it became your son or daughter, instead of the reminder of my betrayal, maybe something good could come from this disaster. You arranged for us to adopt our sister's baby? Daniel said slowly, without telling us the baby was yours? I was going to tell you after the adoption was finalized. I was going to confess everything and face the consequences, but the baby would already be safe with parents who loved it. Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. So your plan was to manipulate everyone involved, forge documents, and trick your own son into raising your illegitimate child? The documents aren't forged, William said desperately. Sophia knew. She agreed to it. Under coercion, I said, because you threatened to cut off her money and medical care if she didn't comply. Because I was trying to give that baby the best possible life. William's composure finally cracked. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I planned to destroy my marriage and lose my sons? I made a terrible mistake, and I was trying to fix it the only way I knew how. By lying to everyone, Michael said. By manipulating Sophia into giving up her baby, manipulating Charlotte and Daniel into adopting it without knowing the truth, manipulating Mom into believing you were faithful. William slumped into a chair, looking utterly defeated. I know how it sounds, but I love that baby already, and I love all of you, and I couldn't see any other way to protect everyone involved. Protect? Daniel's voice was deadly quiet. Dad, did it occur to you that Charlotte and I might not want to raise your child? That we might not want the constant reminder of your affair in our daily lives? I hoped that once you loved the baby, the circumstances of its conception wouldn't matter anymore. The circumstances, I repeated. You mean your affair with my sister? Charlotte, please try to understand. I was drunk, lonely, going through a midlife crisis. Patricia had been distant for months. We were barely speaking. Sophia was there, and she was hurt and vulnerable after her breakup, and one thing led to another. One thing led to 9 months of lying and manipulation, Patricia said. William, even if I could forgive the affair, even if I could understand the momentary weakness, I can't forgive the elaborate deception that followed. The apartment, the fake adoption papers, the plan to trick our son into raising your child. William looked around the room at the faces of his family, searching for any sign of forgiveness or understanding. He found none. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now you face the consequences, Patricia said. I'm filing for divorce. I'm taking half of everything, including the business. You can explain to your clients why Patterson Construction is becoming Patterson Morris Construction. The adoption papers are void, I added. Sophia keeps her baby and raises it however she sees fit. You don't get to control her life anymore. And you stay away from all of us, Daniel finished. I don't want you at family gatherings, I don't want you around my future children, and I don't want you anywhere near Charlotte. William's face crumpled completely. Daniel, please, you're my son. I know I made mistakes, but you made choices, Daniel corrected. Deliberate, calculated choices over a period of months. This wasn't a mistake, Dad. This was a pattern of deception and manipulation that showed me exactly who you really are. I pulled out my own phone and stopped recording. We have everything we need for Sophia's protection and Patricia's divorce proceedings. I think you should leave now. William stood slowly, leaving the adoption papers scattered on the coffee table. At the door, he turned back one final time. Charlotte, I want you to know that I genuinely believed Daniel would be a wonderful father to that baby. I wasn't trying to hurt you. But you did hurt me, I said simply. You hurt all of us. And the worst part is that you're still trying to justify it instead of just apologizing.
After he left, the cabin fell silent except for the gentle lapping of lake water outside. Patricia gathered up the adoption papers and threw them into the fireplace, watching as William's elaborate scheme turned to ash. "So, what happens now?" Jessica asked. "With you and Daniel, I mean." I looked at Daniel. This man I'd been planning to spend my life with just 24 hours ago. His father's betrayal had revealed fractures in both our families that would take years to heal, if they ever could. "I don't know," I admitted. "Everything's different now." "The marriage license expires in 90 days, Daniel said quietly. "Maybe we use that time to figure out who we are after all this. And if we decide we can't get past it, then we let it expire. And we try to stay friends despite everything our families have done to each other." The weeks following William's confession at the cabin were a whirlwind of legal consultations and family meetings. Patricia's divorce attorney, Margaret Chen, was a formidable woman in her 50s who specialized in high-asset divorces involving deception and fraud. "The attempted manipulation of adoption papers could be considered fraud," Margaret explained during our first meeting at her downtown Sacramento office. "William's pattern of coercion towards Sophia gives us additional leverage in the divorce proceedings." Patricia sat across from the polished conference table, no longer the broken woman from the wedding disaster. The past month had transformed her into someone I barely recognized. Sharper, more decisive, with a steely determination that reminded me why William had fallen in love with her 40 years ago. "I want to make sure Sophia has everything she needs for the baby," Patricia said. "Medical care, housing assistance, legal protection. William may have cut off her support, but I won't abandon her." It was an unexpected development. Patricia choosing to financially support the woman who'd had an affair with her husband defied every expectation about how this situation's typically played out.
"Why are you helping her?" I'd asked Patricia privately the week before. "Because she's 26 years old, pregnant and scared," Patricia had replied simply. "And because holding on to anger toward her won't bring my marriage back, but helping her might give that baby a chance at a stable life." Sophia had moved back in with my parents temporarily, but the living situation was tense. My mother struggled with conflicting emotions, protecting her pregnant daughter while grappling with shame over Sophia's choices. My father threw himself into work, staying late at his accounting firm rather than dealing with the family drama at home. "The stress isn't good for the baby," Sophia confided during one of our tentative coffee meetings at a quiet cafe in Davis. "Mom hovers constantly, checking on me every hour like I might disappear. Dad barely looks at me." "They're processing everything in their own way," I offered, though I knew how inadequate that sounded. "Charlotte, I need you to know that I never intended for things to spiral the way they did. When I signed those papers William gave me, I genuinely thought they were just financial agreements. I didn't realize until later that he was essentially trying to give my baby away." These conversations were excruciating, but necessary. Rebuilding trust with Sophia required understanding not just what she'd done, but why she'd felt trapped enough to handle it so destructively. Daniel was struggling with his own demons. His relationship with Michael had grown stronger. They'd always been close, but witnessing their father's deception had bonded them in a new way. However, Daniel's therapy sessions with Dr. Rodriguez revealed deeper issues. "I keep questioning everything I thought I knew about relationships," Daniel told me after one particularly difficult session. "If my father could deceive my mother for months while planning our wedding, while giving me advice about marriage, what does that say about the foundation of trust between any two people?" Dr. Rodriguez had suggested couples counseling for us, which we attended twice weekly throughout November and December. The sessions were awkward initially. How do you process your sister's affair with your fiancé's father while planning a new wedding? Trust is rebuilt through consistent, small actions over time, Dr. Martinez, our couples therapist, explained. Both of you experienced profound betrayal from people you loved. Learning to trust each other again will require patience and intentional effort. Meanwhile, the viral aftermath of our original wedding continued creating unexpected complications. A production company approached us about turning our story into a reality show. 2 different publishers wanted book rights. My LinkedIn was flooded with interview requests from podcasters who thought our family drama would make compelling content.
It's grotesque, Jessica said during one of our regular check-ins. People are treating the worst day of your life like entertainment. But there were positive developments too. The outpouring of support from friends and colleagues had been overwhelming. My boss had given me an extended leave of absence with full pay. Daniel's tech company had provided access to counseling services for both of us. Even strangers on social media, amid all the mockery and memes, had sent messages of encouragement and solidarity. The legal proceedings against William moved swiftly. Patricia's forensic accountant discovered that the San Jose apartment wasn't the only secret expense. William had been siphoning money from their joint accounts for almost a year, funding not just Sophia's housing, but also expensive dinners, weekend trips, and jewelry that Patricia had never seen. The financial infidelity is almost worse than the emotional betrayal, Patricia admitted during one of our family dinners at the cabin, which had become our neutral meeting ground. Michael's children, 8-year-old Emma and 6-year-old Jake, were handling their grandfather's absence better than expected. Children are remarkably adaptable, and Sarah had done an excellent job explaining the situation in age-appropriate terms. Grandma William made some very bad choices that hurt people in our family. Sometimes when adults make bad choices, they have to live somewhere else for a while. "Will he come back for Christmas?" Emma had asked. "I don't think so, sweetheart. But Grandma Patricia will be here, and Uncle Daniel and Aunt Charlotte." Aunt Charlotte? The title still felt surreal, given everything that had happened, but we were moving forward with our relationship despite the chaos surrounding us. 3 months later, Daniel and I were married in a small ceremony at the courthouse in Sacramento. Just our immediate families, no social media, no photographers except Rachel with her phone camera. Patricia was there, newly confident in her independence and wearing a beautiful navy dress she'd bought for the occasion. Michael brought his kids, who served as our flower girl and ring bearer, slowly adjusting to their grandfather's absence from their lives. Sophia was there too, 7 months pregnant now and glowing despite everything she'd been through. She and I were slowly rebuilding our relationship, though trust would take much longer to restore.
The ceremony itself lasted 15 minutes. Judge Henderson, a family friend of my father's, kept things simple and meaningful. When Daniel and I exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, there wasn't a dry eye in the small courtroom. "I promise to choose you every day, especially when everything around us is falling apart," Daniel said, his voice steady but emotional. "I promise to build something new with you from whatever pieces we have left," I replied, thinking of all the ways our families had been broken and reformed over the past months. William wasn't invited, and he didn't try to contact us. According to Patricia's lawyer, he'd moved to Phoenix and was starting over with a construction company focused on commercial properties, carrying the weight of everything he'd destroyed. His brother had told Michael that William seemed like a broken man, but none of us were ready to feel sympathy for him yet. As for the viral wedding disaster that had made us temporarily internet famous, it eventually faded from social media, replaced by newer scandals and fresher drama. But for those of us who lived through it, September 15th would always be the day our families imploded and somehow, against all odds, found a way to rebuild something stronger from the wreckage. The baby, when she arrived in February, was named Grace Elena Morgan, taking Sophia's maiden name rather than Patterson. She was perfect, with dark hair and serious eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. And while the circumstances of her conception would always be complicated, she was welcomed into a family that had learned the hard way that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up for each other when everything falls apart. 6 months after Grace's birth, Daniel and I bought a house in Folsom, close enough to both families, but far enough from the memories of that terrible September day. We're planning our own family now, and Grace will grow up knowing her cousins, understanding that families come in all different configurations, and that sometimes the most beautiful stories emerge from the most devastating beginnings. Sometimes the best weddings are the ones that teach you what really matters, and sometimes the worst disasters lead to the most beautiful beginnings. Our story isn't the fairy tale I once imagined, but it's real, and it's ours, and it's built on a foundation of truth rather than the illusions that nearly destroyed us all. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now.
And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.